Hey, it's the Profit Answer Man, Rocky Lalvani. If you're new to the podcast, check out my interview with Mike Michalowicz. It's episode number 2. If you want to hear about each chapter in the Profit First book, go back and listen to episodes 3 through 13. Episode 1 is the why and how. On the Profit Answer Man, we learn money mastery without all the complicated accounting mumbo-jumbo using a simple system. Your accountant is busy documenting your transactions and creating a rearview mirror of what happened. My guess is you don't even look at the reports they sent you. If you're like most business owners, you struggle with this, and it's not your fault. We aren't taught money in school, and accountants aren't taught how to be profitable. The Profit First system created by Mike Michalowicz works, and he certified me to help you implement the system in your business. Remember, the new equation is sales minus profit equals expenses. Let's face it, without cash flow, you can't pay your employees, buy needed materials, or pay your mortgage and support your family. I help you to do that and more, so you can focus on the parts of the business you love and receive the rewards for your labor and investment into your business. The stronger you are as a business owner, the more jobs you create, the better we are as a country. Small business owners are the backbone of America, and for that, you deserve to be well rewarded. Just remember, more revenue does not equal more profit. That's why we focus on the bottom line. Our guest today runs multiple businesses and has shifted from being a W-2 employee to a technician in her business, and finally to a business owner. Allison shares that journey and how Profit First has helped her to make better financial decisions. Listen into some of her struggles and see if they're holding you back from your dream business. Allison Pidgeon is a serial entrepreneur with 5 businesses, all related to mental health. Her favorite job is being a visionary and CEO for her companies. She owns a group of therapy practice called Move Forward Counseling, a virtual assistant business called Move Forward Virtual Assistants, a business called TheraSuite, which is a service for therapists to streamline the process of furnishing and decorating their offices, and she owns the real estate where her group therapy practice is housed. In addition, she works as a business consultant for Practice of the Practice, helping folks start and scale their own group practices. Let's meet Allison and learn from her. Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Allison Pidgeon. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can you share a little bit about yourself and your business?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Alison Pidgeon, and in 2015, I became an entrepreneur. So up until that point, I had been trained as a mental health counselor and decided to leave and start my own practice due to basically getting super burned out. So I started a solo practice pretty quickly, started growing a group practice, and realized how much I loved building a business and started doing business consulting. Then I started a virtual assistant company. Then I ended up getting into real estate investing. I bought a property for my counseling practice. So have my hand in a lot of different things, but love everything that I'm doing, and I'm really good at delegating.
And in order to run all those businesses, you're going to have to delegate a little bit.
Yes. Yes.
So how did you learn about Profit First?
So Profit First definitely went around sort of the therapist community, I think, when it came out, and people were kind of like blown away by this concept, and people in Facebook groups were talking about it. And so I read the book and I was like, oh, this is great. Like, the concept made sense to me. But then actually when it came time to the logistics of actually how to implement it, it was a little overwhelming.
So before we get to implementation, what was your business like cash flow wise before implementing Profit First?
Yeah. So obviously, all of them, I believe all of my money was in one account. And you look at your account and you think, oh, great, I have money to spend on X, Y, and Z, without realizing, no, you really don't, because this needs to go to taxes and this needs to go to payroll and this, needs to go to rent and all of that kind of stuff. So I definitely had a very hard time, especially in the beginning, with the finances and sort of even knowing what to pay myself, because it was all just in one account.
And that's a question I get all the time. How do I know if I can pay myself yet? And how much can I pay myself? And then there's the guilt about taking it out of the company. In the meantime, you're struggling in your home life because you've got bills to pay and you've got to balance all of that out.
Yes.
And that is one of the things I find that when you have an owner's pay account, you feel more comfortable taking the payout because you know it's been designated for that. You put yourself first and it works. So you said you had trouble with the implementation. What was it that was a struggle for you?
I think the hard part was figuring out how to get started, because I didn't have a ton of profit, or like I didn't have a big emergency fund in the business. So it felt like, well, if I'm going to divide this money up into all these different accounts, I'm going to be like scraping the bottom of the barrel every time. Or how am I not going to know that I'm going to overdraw this account or whatever? And then just, calculating the percentages correctly. And obviously when you first start, it's not going to be perfectly allocated where it should be, because you have to sort of over time, jigger with the percentages to start putting, more into savings or whatever the case may be. So, I think it was that, especially just the startup phase.
And it is. In the beginning, it depends on your cash flow. If you've got great cash flow, it's much less of an issue. If you don't have great cash flow, you have to play around. You have to try things and test and keep a good eye, because the last thing we want to do is bounce checks, and be aware of what's going on. And over time, with a little bit of playing around, you get it going and it works. So how is things now that you got it fully implemented and it's working?
Yeah. So what I ended up doing was finding an excellent accountant who specializes in profit first and also helps specifically therapist practices. And they helped me get everything set up. And then she emails me every 2 weeks and says, move this money here, move that money here. Like, I don't have to think about it. I just do it. And if I run into a problem, I can ask her. So that has been worth its weight in gold to have, the help from the accountant just to get it implemented. And now that it is implemented, like, I see how valuable it is, because like you said, in the past, I would not have known really what I should be paying myself, or, can I really take this, profit out or as a dividend or a draw? Or is this really something that I should be leaving in the bank? And so I feel really confident now. I am taking that money out. It is mine. It's not really meant for something else.
And it's true. Profit First gives you the confidence to be able to make those types of financial decisions. So just for business owners, you're a fellow business owner, some of the lessons you've learned. I know one of the things that you talk about is reviewing expenses on a quarterly basis. What are you looking for when you do that?
Yeah, obviously, one thing you want to look for is if there's any transactions you don't recognize. I mean, obviously, fraudulent charges are very common, and they can be small and you don't realize it. I once had a charge on my card for like 53 cents. And I learned that what they do is they initially do a really small amount, so you don't notice. And then they go back in and like charge a much larger amount. So looking for that, looking for, did I subscribe to this, software or something that I used for a while and now we don't use it anymore, but I'm still getting charged every month. Obviously, then you're just wasting that money and you should just cancel that subscription. Those types of things, just kind of having, an idea of what money is going out and if it's really still needed for the business or not.
We just had an issue with one of my clients where one of their bills jumped dramatically. And it's basically because they were under contract. The contract ended. They don't always tell you, or you don't always pay attention. And then the next thing you know, the rates start skyrocketing until you notice that they're skyrocketing, and you pick up the phone and you spend hours trying to renegotiate and get it down. And that's one of the things that you'll pick up if you are reviewing your expenses on a regular basis.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, because that actually happened to me with my workman's comp insurance. They had something weird happen, and it literally, the price went up like 10 times. And we didn't make a profit that month. And my accountant was like, you have this really big charge that you don't normally have. And that's how we found it, because she was looking and she noticed it looked strange. So it does happen.
Which brings up the next topic, which is to review your numbers overall on a monthly basis. So what are you doing on a monthly basis?
Yeah, so I'm looking at a profit and loss statement to see how everything is looking. We're comparing that to the previous year of the same month, just to see, where are we at compared to last year. We're also looking at some other pieces of data, even, obviously that has to do with financials, but like we look at our capacity, how many sessions did we do that month? What is our average reimbursement rate? Things like that.
And so business is essentially a math problem. And if you look at, in your case, how many clients, average reimbursement, number of visits, you can do the math and come up with and predict what's going to happen.
Exactly.
The problem we have is, and I'm sure you hear this too, there's a lot of people who say, I hate math. What do you have to say to them?
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. That was always a struggle for me in school. And I realized when I became a business owner how important it was to at least have some knowledge of what was going on, and like reviewing those reports and seeing what's coming in, what's going out, do things look normal or not. And if I didn't know the answer, going to somebody who did know the answer and, trying to find out why. So obviously I'm not going to learn enough to be to the level of my accountant, but I need to know enough so I can make good decisions about my business and make sure that we can remain profitable and pay our staff and do all of those types of things.
So you've said a few things about your accountant, because I don't think most people have the same experience that you do with your accountant.
She's awesome. I should tell you where she comes from, but then I don't want to share her. So,
well, most people aren't having monthly conversations. The accountants aren't looking for anomalies in their books. They're generally doing taxes. And so you have to make sure that you have the right expectations for that person. And that is what the person is looking for and doing. Because if they're just working on taxes, then none of this other stuff is going to get covered.
Yeah, so let me explain that a little bit. So I actually have two accountants. One does my taxes, and the other one is the one I've been referencing, who does my bookkeeping. And what I pay for is called like a Cfo package. So what a CFO would do in a business large enough to hire their own CFO, she does for me, except obviously I'm not big enough to need my own in-house person. So I'm buying a chunk of her time every month, and she's doing all these CFO type tasks for me. So I would say, we got close to, probably $800,000 a year range. And I just realized like, there's no reason why I should be doing this myself. Like, the girl who did not do well in math in high school should not be, managing $800,000 by herself. So that's when I went looking for somebody who could really function like the CFO.
Smart move. So one of the things you've done in your business is you've gone from the technician, the worker, to the owner, to running the business. What was that transition like for you? I know a lot of people tell me it's hard to let go.
Yeah, I think especially in our field where we put so much time and money into our education, not only to get a master's degree, and then you have to work for 2 years before you can get a license. And then it's just like a long road of getting that degree and that license, and then realizing, 10 years into it, like, oh, I don't really want to be doing this anymore. Like, this isn't what, I'm like, I did it. It was great. I'm so glad that I went and got my degree and went down that path, because it definitely helps me in business. But it just wasn't, it was like boring to me. And so I realized that, really stepping into being the CEO and not seeing clients anymore was really the path that felt better to me. And so it ended up being a slow process, because obviously you can't just wake up, the next day and be like, well, I'm not going to see my client, my whole caseload of clients anymore, because obviously that's not ethical. But also, you need your finances to catch up with what the other therapists are bringing in. So I would say that probably was like over a period of like a year and a half or 2 years. I just like slowly whittled down my caseload, and then finally just decided I was going to be done.
And that happens to everyone, right? Sometimes you get tired of the business and you want to make changes. And that's one of the reasons I like to have on some of the people who help sell businesses, because if you do it right up front, when that time comes, it's easy to make the transition. Otherwise, you're going to spend 3 years trying to get it right so that you can make the big payday when you walk away, and it's doing it right. In order to make that transition, though, you have to shift your mindset around making an investment in the business. Because a lot of your expenses have to go out before the revenue necessarily starts to grow. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that's one thing my consulting clients tend to struggle with. So I work a lot with folks who've started their own solo practice, which, in terms of startup cost is very, very little, right? Because it's a service-based business. You don't even have to rent an office anymore, because now we're all doing online therapy. So when we then teach them about growing a group practice, well, now they're having to make some, upfront investments. Maybe they're, having to buy new software, new phone system. Now they're, hiring an HR company to help them get everything set up. And they don't think about the fact that, that money is going to grow down the road. It's like putting money into the stock market. We know over history, you make about a 10% return on the money you put in the stock market. And so, unlike when I buy a car, and the minute I buy a car and drive it away, it starts depreciating. You're not sort of throwing your money away. You're putting your money in the stock market. It's going to grow. And the story I always tell people is, when I started my solo practice, I put $3,300 of my own money into that, started getting that business started up. And all of the money I have used since then has just been reinvesting the profits. And this year we'll make about $2 million. And that's been in the process of 6 years. And so I tell people, would you take $3,300 today in order to have $2 million 6 years from now? And they say, yeah. And I say, well, that's what you're doing right now by building this group practice.
That's quite impressive that you were able to do that and to grow your business. And it does take money to some extent to make money. You have to be intentional and figure out what your return's going to be and how it's going to work out, and figuring all of that. Any lessons learned along the way of growth?
Yeah, I think something that I tell people, obviously being the one who's delivering the service of business consulting, I also am a big believer in receiving business consulting. I've always had a business consultant since probably about 2016. And I just see how much it's helped me kind of learn the shortcuts and avoid mistakes. And it's helped me to grow faster. So again, that's another thing where you're making an investment, but my accountant actually has done research on the practices they have that actually do invest in business coaching or consulting. They end up making an average of 30% more a year than people who don't.
And you know what? It's kind of funny, because one of the biggest things I found, and I didn't expect this going in, but one of the biggest things I do is provide accountability. especially on the finances. And so we're consistently meeting and we're constantly looking at the numbers. And because of that, the business owners are constantly improving. They're making little teeny steps going forward. And when they hit a friction point, they don't ignore it. They have to deal with it, which is another thing, because a lot of times when we hit friction, we let things fester for a little too long and we pay a massive price for that. And so having that constant focus, attention, and time put to that definitely makes a big difference.
Yeah, accountability is huge for sure.
It is, along with the knowledge of somebody who's already made mistakes and can show you how to prevent them. That's, we either learn from our own mistakes, we learn from other people's. It's a lot cheaper to learn from other people's mistakes than our own. Any other advice for business owners as we wrap up here today?
Yeah, I think something that is hard to see when you're in the beginning stages, you feel like you're working all the time. And especially when people start group practices, they can't really see any less clients than they did. There's kind of this tipping point at which, you have to grow big enough to really see that return on investment or see that, chunk of your salary now coming from what the other providers are bringing in. And I think a lot of people, I'm thinking like for me, that was probably the first 2 years. And I think a lot of people get into that and they're like, this is terrible. And they quit. And so I just try to impart to people like, yes, this is really hard. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. But like, if you could see the other side, you would absolutely want to stick with it, because I work way less now than I ever have. I make way more money than I ever have in my life. Like, it is beautiful. It's the best thing I've ever done. But obviously, you're going to work really hard to get it.
And I always used to use a slide analogy with my kids. I'm like, the taller the slide, the harder it is to climb, but the more fun coming down. And so throughout life and through business and everything else that you have to do, if you put the hard work in up front and you do it correctly, you get to enjoy the fruits of your labor. Speaking of which, you mentioned something in the beginning. You run a company that deals with virtual assistants. And I think this is one thing that is super important for business owners is we do a lot of stuff that we probably shouldn't. And at the same time, we think it's too expensive to get help, but it doesn't necessarily need to be that way. Can you tell us a little bit about who you serve and how you serve them with virtual assistants and how that may be able to help business owners?
Sure. So we have a VA company. It's called Move Forward Virtual Assistants, and we specifically help practice owners, so therapy practice owners, and that's all that we do. So we hire people who understand healthcare and insurance lingo and all of that kind of stuff, how to handle, clients on the phone when they're crying and all those things that that ends up happening in a therapy practice. So we really take a lot of that or all of that work off their plate, because, it's crazy to think that like if you as the provider, let's say you're charging $150 an hour to see a client, but then you're, not going to hire somebody for $20 an hour to answer your phone. You know what I mean? Like they think they need to do that themselves, when obviously if you can hire somebody for less than $150 to do a task, like you should just do it.
In this case, like, is one person shared across multiple offices or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So our sweet spot is really like the small to medium sized group practices, because they typically aren't big enough to be able to afford their own like full-time in-house person. So we kind of, provide like a bridge if they're growing or if they're, going to stay kind of that small to medium size. That works for them. And what we find too is that the assistant always brings in over and above what you end up paying for, because they're at the ready to answer the phone, keep people's schedules full. Somebody cancels, they go to the wait list, they fill in that spot. Like you will make over and above the money you end up paying the virtual assistant, because they will keep schedules full and keep the practice running well.
And stuff gets done, because there's a lot of things we all hate doing. And so what we do is not do it.
Yes.
And if there's somebody there who loves doing that and can help you out, and again, you don't need to pay for overhead, you don't need to bring them into your office, and you have the ability to offer excellent customer service at a fraction of the price, it's well worth it.
Right.
Definitely well. If people would like to find you and the work you do, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, probably through the Practice of the Practice website and my email. It's Allison with one L at practiceofthepractice.com. Obviously, I have other websites for my other businesses, but that's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
And we'll put that into the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was fun.
Many people think math is hard, and they hate to look at numbers. It's just the way some of us are. Not me. That's why, as a business owner, you should have someone on your team that will help you understand your numbers, along with creating the time and the space to make sure it's getting reviewed and acted upon. There are a lot of us who can do this for you. Find the one you will work with and listen to, and get along with, and get the help you need if you're not the math whiz in your business. Remember, you don't need more resources, you need to be more resourceful. We focus on the bottom line. If you want a done-for-you service, you can have me as your Chief Profitability Officer, because you have your zone of genius and want to spend your time doing what you love. I only work with a handful of clients, so they get my full attention. I work with business owners who have or are growing to $500,000 to $5 million in revenue. You can use the scheduling link in the show notes to get on my calendar for a good fit conversation to see if I'm the right person to support you and how I can help you. If you want to learn about living the life of your dreams, check out my other podcast, Richer Soul. As we close out, let's repeat the mantra. Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. Have an abundant and profitable week.